Hello everyone, I'm Adam Papagan. Welcome to the ASMR Talk Show, the show that feels good to hear. ASMR, the kind of soft sounds, put you in a good mood, maybe cause a little tingle in the front of your brain, and that's how we approach interviewing and talking to people and having a good time. Last night I was very excited. I was had a coupon to Pacific Dining Car, which is a fancy restaurant out here in Los Angeles, which is train themed. And I don't know why trains are supposed to be fancy or whatever, but it's a good fancy, expensive restaurant. I had a coupon for the steak was going to be 98 cents. Now, not like a huge T-bone steak. It was a little small steak. But I was like, oh, that's cool. So I'm on my way over to the restaurant. It's late at night. My car starts making a funny noise. And I don't panic, but I'm a block away from my mechanic. So I call him up. He gives me the gate code. I stash the car. And so I'm like, oh, I still have enough time to make this reservation. It sounds nice, treat myself, drink a martini, eat this steak. And I go, look, the Uber ride would have been $16 just to get over to the restaurant, and then to get away from downtown LA back to home would be another $20, $30. So there goes any potential discount I would have gotten from eating at the restaurant. And so I just went and got a sub sandwich, and honestly, it was fine. I didn't miss the steak. I didn't miss the martini. And, I realize it is fun to treat yourself sometimes. But in general, that stuff's bad for you. So if you are presented with an opportunity just to eat something a little healthier, get a good night's sleep, get home early, get a fresh start on the day the next day, maybe sometimes take that. Don't have too much fun. Folks, I'm really excited about my guest tonight. As what I do is being a tour guide and a historian and somebody who just runs my mouth for a living, and just being a fan of music and pop culture and stuff. I'm always talking about the 60s and thinking about the 60s and what a crazy time it was. But rarely, and tonight we have the opportunity to talk to someone who was actually around in the 60s and not just as a bystander, was innovating in music, was hanging out with some of these enormous personalities that have come to define the era. Andy is the inventor of the wah-wah pedal. Please join me in welcoming Del Casher.
Hello.
Del, thanks for coming. So, you were in the Wrecking Crew, which were the group of studio musicians around L.A.
I was.
You were a Wrecking Crew member.
Oh yes, I was a Wrecking Crew. Well,
did you guys use the term Wrecking Crew ever to refer to yourselves as that?
Never.
Came later. Hal Blaine.
Well, Hal Blaine, Tommy Tedesco, Carol Kay. There were only about a handful of guitar players at that time could play rock and play jazz and whatever.
And there were studios. It's kind of hard to imagine. You go around Hollywood now. There's some of these places, but there were studios everywhere, right?
Oh yes.
And big names would be in there. And when you would get called to do a session, it would just be sort of like for anything, right?
Well, the way it really happened was we step back one step before that time. Okay, I'm a young guy growing up in Hammond, Indiana, and I want to be a guitar star. So I had my own radio show when I was 16 years old in Hammond, Indiana, the mini guitars of Del Casher. And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh. And
what was that show like? You were just playing guitar on air?
Oh, yes. I played, I started when I was 13. And by the time I was 14, I was playing gigs all over the area. And then when I was 16, I had my own radio show.
And this is pre-rock and roll?
Well, there was a guy named Elvis Presley that was sort of breaking the ice over there.
Okay.
But the music wasn't going to last. The music was going to wear out. And there were people going to go back to Hawaiian music. Well, anyway. But let's say at that time.
So who were some of your guitar influences then? If it's right at the beginning of, because I would think, Chuck Berry is like a great guitar player, but then he had to get influenced by somebody, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, before Chuck Berry, we had the guitar players that played in the orchestras and the big bands, and all they did was just thump on the guitar. But the guy that broke the ice on that thing was a guy named Les Paul. And believe me, he wasn't a guitar, he was a person. And I used to listen to Les's records, and he was so fantastic and had a great innovation of sound for the guitar and for the quality of recording. So I started listening to Les a lot, and I listened to other guitar players that were very fine players of the day. But nobody really was playing like what you call it, rock and roll?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. I forget that term. And so, you're kidding. And so the thing was that I went up to see Les Paul playing at the Chicago Theater, and I had connections where I said, I want to meet Les personally. And
From the radio show, you had connections and
What's
stuff.
that?
From the radio show, is that how you had your connections? And playing gigs and
from
stuff.
my radio show,
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
knew some people who really liked me a lot. They thought I was going to be a big star someday, you know. And so they introduced me to Les, and I went to his dressing room, and I said, and I played his first guitar, you know, the first gold top guitar. I'm holding the guitar, and Mary Ford, his wife, says, wow, I'd like to take a picture of you two guys. Oh, my God, I don't have a camera. She said, well, I have a Polaroid camera. Well, I said, what's that? And she goes, here, I'll snap the picture. And, of course, that's all history. But I said to Les, I said, you know, what's your secret of success? What's the secret of success? And he said, well, being there at the right time with the right thing. Now, that's pretty simple. So I figured, hey, I'm going to be a big star. Just follow that formula. So moving forward, I started playing things. I went on the road but I had to get my high school diploma, so I came back to high school.
What was it like going on the road in those days?
Very interesting. I hired an old guy. He was 37 years old, and he had a new car. And he played rhythm guitar and sang, and I did all my solos, and I did a lot of comedy. I did the hats like Jerry Lewis was, and the comedy to Pantomime Records. So I would go up to Antigo, Wisconsin, you know, the hotbed for jazz guitar. No, it was Antigo, Wisconsin. I played Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
What kind of vehicle? Just some big old car? And you'd stuff the gear in there?
Oh, yeah, but I had a real great amplifier,
Yeah.
two speakers, and brand new Gibson guitar. And we would travel through Wisconsin, and then my last gig was Quincy, Illinois, and I did my comedy routine and played a lot of guitar and shredding on the guitar and playing everything imaginable I could think of. And then I went back to high school because I got out of high school when I was 17, and got a scholarship at the University of Pittsburgh. And then I played with a group called the Pittsburgh Tambouritsons, which is all ethnic music of Europe, some Russian songs and all that, and Russian and all the dances from the Eastern Europe. So I had to learn all that music. And at the same time, I was playing gigs at night. And this thing about rock and roll kept keeping up. People say, why'd you play some rock and roll? I mean, you like that guy, that Elvis Presley? Oh, yeah, I play like that. So I said, yeah, I can rip that. That's easy stuff. That's only 3 chords. So I was playing gigs in Pittsburgh at night and going to school during the day. And so talking about the Wrecking Crew now, let's fast forward over to, I said, you know, I'm going to move to Hollywood. And at that time, of course, big bands were still alive. And this guy, Elvis, was creeping into Hollywood. He started doing movies. Can you imagine a rock star?
In like 56.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was Love Me Tender was his first one.
Yeah, he loved. In fact, people were waiting outside in Pittsburgh in 20-degree temperatures, waiting to see this rock star, Elvis Presley. And I thought, man, I don't think he's a very good guitar player. And, I thought, I'm not going to follow that. But people kept asking me, can you play rock and roll? So I said, I'll play rock and roll. You want me to play it? I'm going to do it for you. So when I came to Hollywood, I noticed that there was these, 2 sets of musicians. I mean, there were the old guys, the guys that were 45, 50 years old, and the young guys who were 20, 21, 25, whatever that. So you had a little bit of a competition between the two. And the old guys kept saying, rock and roll, it's wrecking music. You guys play terrible. It's awful music. But there was a young guy that was playing in Vegas named Hal Blaine, and he was playing gigs over there, and he said, if I go to Hollywood, and I know the rhythm beats for rock and roll, he said, maybe I can make some money. So Hal came to Hollywood, And so there was a group of like a handful of musicians who said, yeah, hey, they'll call us for a recording session. You get $65 for 3 hours. My gosh. Can you imagine? That's a lot of money. I mean,
even today, I'd for 3 hours.
Today we play for free a lot of times. But anyway, I sort of got into the clique of the small group of musicians that were called around town. And what it was, there you had like Gold Star was an independent studio.
Yeah, on Vine.
No, they were right on Vine and Santa Monica, right at the corner there.
And Eddie Cochran recorded his songs there.
Oh, everybody recorded there.
And Phil Spector. Did you ever play on any of the Phil Spector stuff?
I knew Phil's very well. And
it seems like that stuff was maybe about a decade ago, was 2 decades ago, rediscovered and people started reappraising it. But then now it seems like people who know the Mamas and the Papas and the Monkees and the Byrds and some of these other groups don't really like Phil Spector. It seems kind of dated now, the Wall of Sound.
Well, I mean, I would think so after, about 50, 60 years or so.
But personally, I think like the Monkees stuff and the Beach Boys stuff definitely still sounds really kind of fresh.
Right. Well, you got to think about the fact that it was a big flood of changeover of music. We were suddenly now invading the traditional big band and the little combo jazz things, and we were turning music around. And so it was a big revolution. So you had a Gold Star, which was the independent studio, but if you're doing really like Capitol Records or Columbia Records was right in the area too. So we would be on call, and I would get a call to say, can you do a recording session at 9 o'clock in the morning tomorrow? Yeah, oh sure. Well, it'll be from 9 to 12, and then we've got another session at 4 o'clock in the afternoon from 4 to 7. Oh, great, I do that, yeah. So you go from Gold Star, then you run over to Capitol Records, then the next day you'd be running over to Columbia on Sunset Boulevard.
And it was for just any kind of music? Like, would they tell you what it was going to be for?
Well, one time it was for a singer named Patti Page, who had a big hit called Tennessee Waltz back in 1951, when I was just 13 years old. And so that music was very traditional, with big orchestras. And then you'd run down to Gold Star, and you'd be ripping on the guitar and turning it up real loud, and ripping on stuff that people wanted to sound like rock music and players. And at that same time, Chuck Berry was coming out of the Memphis sound and all that. And of course, Elvis Presley was invading Hollywood with his movies.
Yeah, so you actually hung out with him, right?
Well, it didn't happen exactly that way. It wasn't that easy. I got a call from Paramount Pictures, and they said, hey, Elvis Presley's doing a movie called Roustabout, and he needs a guitar player. And I said, great, I mean, I'll play guitar. No, but you got to be in the movie too. I said, I don't want to do that. And they, well, you have to be there 12 hours a day. I said, I don't want to do that. And besides, Elvis is, he's a terrible guitar player, and I don't want to really work with him. I don't think I'm going to do the job. So they said, oh, come on, you got to do it. Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. So I finally looked at my book. There was nothing booked in my calendar, so I said, well, I'll make arrangements to be there. So I show up in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and Elvis is already in the dressing room getting his makeup. And, he goes in, gets his makeup, walks right out, very businesslike. And then Colonel Tom Parker's manager said, if anybody talks to Elvis, you're going to be thrown off the lot.
He was a mean guy, huh?
Well, he was kind of a nasty, he was, yeah.
Yes, he got to be.
And I said, I don't even want to talk to Elvis. I mean, he's a lousy guitar player, and I'm just here for the money. And, Barbara Stanwyck, famous movie actress, she was there reading a book. She was wonderful, nice to talk to, Pat Buttram, all these people. But you couldn't talk to the star, But I don't want to talk to him. So they block out a scene in the morning, and we block it all, and then everybody's leaving for lunch. I figured, I'm just going to sit and practice my guitar. So I start ripping on little things that I could think of, and everybody leaves except, I noticed Elvis Presley's sitting in his chair staring at me. He's in the director's chair. He's doing like this, and I'm thinking, oh, God, what is he thinking? And I start playing more guitar, and maybe he's not going to like me. He politely walks up and he says, excuse me, is it okay if I can say something to you? And I said, what is it? He said, well, I've been hearing you play guitar. And he said, man, he says, I'd give anything if I could play guitar like you. I looked at him in shock. I said, my God, this is Elvis Presley talking to me like that, like so humble. And I looked at him, I said, gee, I'd do anything I could be like you. And he said, listen, I'm going to go to lunch. But he said, when we get back, I'm going to make sure that I can pay you back for how much I appreciate what you're doing. You know what he did to me? He only gave me a heart attack. We're on the set. I'm supposed to be way on the other side of the stage, unknown, and on the other side is all the dancing girls. And, you know, all they're going to look at dancing girls. What does he do? He runs all the way over to my side, stares right at me, looks me right in the eyes, and it was like, Del, you're going to be in the movie with me forever. And that's what happened. And Elvis became a good friend.
He was known for being very generous.
He what?
Very generous, right?
Oh, very.
And it seems like now, when knowing, you know, what happened to him and his, you know, decline and everything, it's now it's easy to kind of think of him as maybe sort of this tragic figure or something sort of sad about him. But to know him in the moment, did you ever sense any depth in him or any kind of, you know, sadness deep down, or that he was like a deep soul or anything like that?
He was a very religious guy.
Yeah.
And he was not, there were two things going on in Hollywood in the rock era, you know. You had the wild druggies and all the wild people, and Elvis was not that at all.
He was very establishment.
And I don't remember him as a sadness at all. I mean, everybody remembers the unfortunate passing of his,
Yeah.
but really the part you got to remember is that Elvis was really cool, and he was right with it, and he was quick and worked with people, very fair with people, very, very generous with people. The minute that the word got out that Elvis liked me, the Memphis Mafia guys hung around me with me and said, hell, you got to come to the parties. Oh, Elvis, you know, he likes you. You got to come around with us. So whatever Elvis did, you know, they followed it.
Yeah, that was anything Elvis did, everyone had to do it. That's kind of the way it's portrayed.
Well, you know,
if he wanted to ride his golf cart on Elvis Presley Boulevard, everyone just had to do it with him.
If Elvis wanted to go to a carnival, he would just have them cancel the carnival for that night, and all of his friends would take over the whole carnival. And because he couldn't walk down the street, I mean, he would have been mobbed and all that. Now, you know, during that period of time, it was rock and roll, and that was 1964. And then this wild group that you might have heard of called the Beatles, they reformed music again. And what's
just a few years later? I mean, it all seems like it happened pretty quick.
It happened very fast.
Did it feel like it was happening fast at the time as it was happening?
Yes. And it was. I was looking at, you know, I mean, I was a very accomplished classical guitarist and rock player. Whatever they needed me to play, they said, today you're going to be playing classical guitar. Tomorrow you're going to be playing rock and roll. I mean, and the Beatles, like, just turned music upside down in a good way. But at the time you heard it, you say, those guys can't play guitar very well. You know, there's a bunch of guys with mop haircut. Anybody with a haircut like them can do as well. No, that's not true. What really turned out was that Paul McCartney's a great, great composer. Yesterday, his song is surpassed every other song that's ever been written. And you got to say, and Paul is still doing wonderful.
Yeah. And they were... the big way they flipped it is they were writing their own music and playing their own. They were doing it all as a unit, which became the standard for any band going forward. Whereas just a few years before, they would get, you know, a personality who would be a star, and then they would put you guys behind it.
Right. Well, the Wrecking Crew was the guys that recorded for the famous stars, the singers, or they had the bands like the Monkees.
Yeah.
And
did you ever play on any Monkey stuff?
I played in some of the sessions. You know who else played guitar and rock and roll guitar? It's supposed to be a secret. Was the great jazz guitar player Barney Kessel, and he kept saying, "Why am I playing rock and roll? I mean, I'm playing rock and roll. Well, you're getting $65 for the session. That's why you're playing it." And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, there were amazing players that were behind a lot of the rock stars that were really known as great classical players, great jazz players.
Would they let you kind of write your own parts as you were going in?
Well, that was interesting. That's a good story, yes. There were no parts. I mean, for Phil Spector's sessions, for the Ronettes, you'd get a sheet of paper that was like almost blank. And there's a picture of the Wrecking Crew session where Hal Blaine is sitting in the middle just doing nothing, and everybody's looking at their music. Well, there was no music. They were all writing down notes. Oh, that's a G7th chord. Okay, it's going to progress over to B flat. Then we're going to go over to here. And Hal's just sitting here with his hands crossed. Okay, when you guys get the music figured out, then I'll play the drums for you.
Boom, boom.
Yeah. Bump, bump, bump,
Yeah.
bump, bump. And by the way, Hal was one of the nicest guys, wonderful people, great sense of humor. Always started a session out with a great joke, and but he always set the tone for the recording sessions. So he was on Frank Sinatra sessions, on everything you'd imagine, the rock sessions.
Yeah.
So he played, and the reason was he kept it glued together. A drummer, can you imagine making it work? Drummers and bass players make the band.
They hold it down. A band's only as good as its drummer. I'm sure you've heard that expression before.
Yeah.
It really is true.
Yeah, and of course, we guitar players, like I remember I was called, Tommy Tedesco said, "Hey, I want you to play a Phil Spector session. Bring all your guitars." So I bring my guitars, bring my Fender, my Strat, all my electric guitars. And I thought, well, he might want acoustic guitar, so I'm tuning the guitar. And of course, Phil Spector always came to a session and had a revolver sitting on the console.
Right.
I said, "Why does he have a revolver?" "Oh, well, he needs protection." Protection from what? I mean, everything in those days, just everyone was very, very tame. And so I'm tuning up my guitar, and he comes out and he says, "What do you think you're doing?" I said, "I'm tuning up the guitar." He said, "I don't want an acoustic guitar. I want a Telecaster guitar, nothing else." I said, no problem. I'll do Phil, whatever you need, I'll do it for you, So I never played an acoustic guitar for Phil Spector. Always electric guitar, Telecaster.
Wow. Speaking of electric guitars, you invented the wah-wah pedal. Do we have that? Is there a way if we could play that sample?
Yeah.
But I'm asking them in the other room.
Yeah.
But was this like one of the first effects pedals?
No, it wasn't the
And
first
listen to the
effect.
funky bass
It was
guitar
the
sound
fuzz
you get
tone
with
was
the
the
wah-wah
first
pedal.
overdrive.
Okay. How'd you come up with this sound?
Is this another recording of, or where's this?
That was from the thing you sent me, the demo recording, the demonstration of it.
I sent the demo of,
You emailed this to me.
yeah. Well, the thing was, to make a long story short, what happened was that the Vox company was in England, and they made amplifiers for tube amplifiers, and the Thomas Organ company here in Sepulveda, California, bought Vox. Now, the thing was that Thomas Organ was all transistors, and all the guys they had working there were young guys, 21, 22, but they understood transistors. No tubes. So the organs were much lighter, because it all had transistors.
Yeah.
Now, it's not shocking today, but it was amazing in there. Like, how could you get all that sound? How could you get a 200-watt amplifier you could pick it up with one hand? Well, that was transistors. And whereas a tube amplifier, my gosh, you'd have to have 4 people move it.
Yeah.
So what happened was they transformed one of the little mid-range boost tone controls in it. They said, make it into a transistor circuit. So they did. And so I'm practicing with the band called the Bill Page Band. And I see the amplifier, and I'm trying it out. And I try this mid-range boost, and there was a rotary pot. And whereas the original one was a click, like a just 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And this one, they just, to save money, they made it into a rotary. So you just rotated it around. It's in the amplifier. So as I'm playing my guitar, I turn it around like that. I'm saying, wait a minute, this is not a tone control. This actually is making the sound of a word called wah. And the trumpet players in those days, old days, was they had bands that called do what, do wah, 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 wah. The wah-wah trumpet was around for years and years. George Gershwin used a wah-wah trombone in the Rhapsody in Blue. And suddenly I'm hearing this guitar now can be a voice, like what a trumpet player could do. But you can play, or like a harmonica cups his hands going, wah, wah, mommy, that kind of. So this was the way to the new future of turning something electronic into what we knew acoustically with the harmonica player, with the trumpet players. Mm-hmm. So I went to the engineering staff, Stan Cutler, and I said, Stan, that's a transistor, isn't it? He said, yeah. And I said, that can be run with a 9-volt battery. And he said, yeah. I said, get the guy who designed that circuit and have him put it into a pedal for me, because that's what I see as the future. Yeah, why do you want to do that? That doesn't make sense, Del. I said, believe me, I'll show you what it can do.
And so the rest is history.
So when they converted it, they put the little circuit, and I still have the original wah-wah pedal. And they put it in there, and I played it, and I said, this is what you can do with the wah and make the sounds of what a trumpet player would be. So Vox Company said, oh, yes, well, then that should be for electric trumpet. And I said, no, it's not a trumpet thing. No, we can have saxophone players. I said, no, it's for guitar players. Now, what they didn't know, because these guys were like really old, they were like 50 years old, and I was explaining to them, no, you see, we have 4 or 5 guitar players on the session. So they said, no, look at the Lawrence Welks Orchestra. They got 4 trumpet players, 5 saxophones. And I said, no, it's not going to be for the trumpet. And they said, no, let's call up Clyde McCoy, because that would be the trumpet thing that he'd use. And I said, well, okay, you can do that, but let me make the guitar demo and show you what a guitar can do.
Well, Del, if you just go to any music store in the world now, get this pedal, try it out for yourself. I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours and hours. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, this is Adam Papagan reminding you that there's a place you can go, and it's your mind. Good night.
Did you get it covered, what you wanted?
Yeah. I mean, I could have gone on. I have so